When your situations seem impossible, trust in Jesus. He makes all things possible. Do you ever dream about someday? Author Sandee Jo Crocker hung onto her words, someday. Someday she would escape her abusive husband, Tommy. Someday her children would be saved. Someday she wouldn't live in fear. But her someday turned into her worst nightmare. Her husband, Tommy, lay dead from a gunshot wound to his head. And now she has another life to save. This is her story. This is today's Nashville. This is faith. Sandee Jo, what an honor it is to sit down with you today to talk about your book, If Walls Could Talk. You know, I picked it up and I couldn't put it down. It was just a page turner, and wow, what a story. Let's start from the very beginning, when you met your dream man.
Yeah. And I did at 18. Well, I actually met him at 16. And we dated for 2 years. And I just, we were in love. And just like any young girl, I thought, well, I'm going to marry him and live happily ever after.
And he was a pastor's son.
He was the preacher's son, yes. My grandmother introduced us, my Nana. She went to his church and she was like, you have to meet him. So, we just fell in love. And when I had just turned 18, we got married.
Were there any signs while you were dating that there's going to be any issue?
No, not physical. There was no, he never raised his voice to me. He never obviously raised a hand to me. He was just the perfect gentleman. Looking back years later, I see, well, there were 2 times where I could tell, as an adult looking back into this, young girl's life, he was controlling. He wanted me to stop doing some of the things that I did. And he never said, he never got mad at me about it, but he just said, oh, I wish you wouldn't do that, And that was something I loved to do. And I, looking back, I can see, oh, he was already starting to control me when we were dating. But it wasn't obvious enough for me, and I was young and in love. So we married, and we went on our honeymoon. Everything was great still. But the day we actually returned from our honeymoon was the first time he ever put his hands on me. And I was shocked. And
what happened?
I can't remember all the details. I can't remember if he choked me or he shoved me, but I just remember being on the floor. And his hands were just going all around my head, and he was screaming at me.
Did you do something that,
I took too long. We were unloading the truck from our honeymoon. And I stood in the house. I guess I was in the house too long. And he came in, and he was very upset with me. And again, I don't remember all the details. I just remember being on the floor, so he must have shoved me. And then he apologized right away.
What was going through your mind?
I was confused. I was, very confused, very surprised at his behavior. Again, he had never shown any signs of this. Came from a great family. His mom and dad were very godly people, still are. And I couldn't imagine why he did that. But I forgave him, and we moved on. And then it happened again and again. And I fought back, and I thought, well,
how many months in between? Or was it?
No, it was just it just began
progressively,
happening regularly, and I would fight back because I'm like, you're not going to do that to me, and I'm not going to fight back. So if he kicked me, I kicked him. If he hit me, I hit him. But he always won because I couldn't. He was stronger than I was, and we did this, and it was embarrassing for me to think this is going on in a pastor's home. But
did you think about telling anybody?
I never told. And he always told me, you can't tell. I'm sorry, and this won't happen again. That was in the early years. And but then when I became pregnant with our first child, I stopped fighting back because all I could think of was my baby. And so at that point, when he would start beating on me, I would just crouch in a corner and just protect my baby. And it was then that I realized that I can't fight back. And I actually gave birth to our first son with a black eye. And I told this story about how it happened, and everybody believed me because he was the preacher's son, and he was likable. Everybody liked him.
What about your parents? Could you go to your mom, or?
I could have, but I didn't. They loved Tommy. And I just wanted them to love him like I did, because I still loved him in the early years, even though he treated me like that. But after baby number 2 and 3 and 4, I realized I'm trapped. And he told me, if you ever try to leave me, if you ever try to separate me from my kids, I'll find you and I'll kill you. And I'll kill anybody that gets in the way. And I believed him because he was very unstable and very dangerous. And I saw what he did to me in the house. I mean, he used guns against me. He would shoot guns in my direction just to get my attention, just to warn me and to maintain the control. He would use knives. He would put knives up to my neck and he choked me. And of course, his fists that's what I was really afraid of, because I felt them so often. We'd be in a vehicle and he would just drive erratically just to terrorize me, because, you know, we'd be on a backcountry road and he would just drive, and I just thought, okay, he's gonna flip the car, we're gonna run into a tree, just anything he could do to keep me afraid. And that's how he maintained the control in our home. And the kids were raised in it. It's all they knew.
Was there ever a moment, though, when you were having the children, it's like, okay, I've got to get out of this?
Yeah, there were several of those moments. But again, I didn't know anything about, first of all, I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only person going through this. I would go to church, we would look like the perfect family, and I'd look around and I thought, this is just me, I'm going through this. And he would always tell me, you brought this into our marriage. This is the baggage you brought in from your family, from your dysfunctional family. And so I kind of accepted that, and I thought, okay, this is my fault. But you know, I just felt so alone, and I didn't realize that there's shelters, there's places that could help you. I knew I couldn't go to my family, he would find me. And I really was afraid of what he would do when he did find me, or and the kids. So I stayed. And I actually thought, that I was protecting myself and the kids by staying, which now I realize is so, it's hard for people to understand that. But nowadays I tell women, you have to, first of all, you're not alone. And you have to tell somebody. You have to get the courage to tell somebody, and you have to separate yourself from the abuser. And even though that's very risky and very scary, you have to do this, because staying is a risk. Staying can be lethal, and it was for me.
You know, in reading your book, that was my thought, and as I was reading it, is why didn't you leave? And I think a lot of people who are reading it are probably thinking the same thing.
Right. Why didn't I leave? Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, I always thought, well, I'll just leave if it happens again. But then I just felt trapped, like I couldn't. And I didn't know about domestic violence shelters. I didn't know that there are people out there who are trained and can help you and get you the help you need.
How did he treat the kids when they were younger?
He looked like a good dad to others, but at home he was physical with them as well, and do just spanking your child is one thing, a little swat on the bottom, but the way that he did it was terrible, and especially with the boys. He did terrible things to them. A lot of emotional and just mental trauma. I know that that's what they've dealt with over the years, just the things that he said and the things that, just living in that environment and knowing that, okay, Dad's okay now, but in 5 minutes he might not be. And that's terrorizing in your mind, to live in those circumstances. There's
parts in the book that just broke my heart too, with the kids and the pets. And we're gonna talk about your fur babies and pets when we come back, and some of the things that happened there. And we're gonna talk about that when we come back. Sandee Jo, in the midst of all this abuse, you were getting a nursing degree. How did that all happen?
Well, I remember going to my mom when I wanted to get married, and I said, Mom, I want to marry him. He's asked me to marry him, I want to marry him. And she's like, well, you have to get your nursing degree first. And I said, no, I'm going to marry him. I'll get my nursing degree later. And those words have just haunted me for so long. But yes, and finally when our youngest went to school, to kindergarten, I decided I have to do something. I mean, he wasn't keeping jobs. He would be on a job for maybe at the most 9 months, and then he would quit. He'd walk off the job, and I thought, I have to do something to support my family and have some kind of income that I can, rely on. So I went back to school. And that was crazy, because I thought, well, first of all, he's not going to let me, because he was very controlling over where I went. But he said, yeah, do it. And so I was like, okay, God, you're going to have to help me, because only God knew what was going on. So I was still working and cleaning houses, actually, and going to school and staying up late, getting up early, and just doing what I had to do. And finally got my LPN, and then later went from there and got my RN.
But during the midst of it, you were still being abused.
Yes.
Did anybody at work ever notice, or did you ever confide in anyone?
I never shared. Whether they noticed or not. Now I have had people come to me since the book came out and say, I always thought something was just a little different with you. Something, you were so quiet, but I just never could put my finger on it. So I did hear that a lot. I hear that a lot. But yeah, no, I never told anybody at work. And the funny thing is, I'm a nurse, so I'm doing my CEUs on domestic violence, and just going through all the things that you have to be trained to.
Was it confusing for you to be doing that and then thinking, oh, my life is just...
I think looking back, I think what I did is I just knew, okay, this is what I have to do at home. This is what I have to do at work. And I just can't tell, because I honestly thought, if I ever slip, if I ever tell anybody, whether I'm at church, whether I'm at work, it's the end. And I'll pay for it dearly. So I just never did. So I think I just did what I knew I had to do, which was keep my job so that I can pay the bills, and then go home there were many times when I would drive home after a 12-hour shift and just wonder what is going on at home.
Did you ever worry about the kids?
Absolutely. I worried about them constantly. In fact, I knew when they were the school hours. So I knew from the minute they got on the school bus until they got off the school bus that they were safe. And so during that time when I was at work, I thought, okay, the kids are safe. But from the time that they got home till the time I got off work, that's the time that I would worry, and especially on weekends too.
Did anybody at school, the counselors or anything, say anything about the kids, or?
No, never to me, never to me. But I did just, I was just able to see a lot of their teachers a couple of weeks ago and talk to some of the kids' teachers. And they said the same thing. They said, your kids were great in class, and I just remember you, and I remember thinking something just didn't seem right. And that's the thing. There was something about our life that seemed a little off, but really didn't know where to put how to say exactly what that was. So, and the kids were always so good, and they seemed great. And of course, they didn't tell. I mean, we couldn't tell. It was what was kind of ingrained in our head. You can't tell, and so they didn't tell. I didn't tell, and yeah.
Let's talk about some of the things that your husband would do. Some of the animal stories in here were sad.
The first pet that he killed was before we ever had kids. It was a ferret, and I wanted this little ferret. He was cute. He bought him for me, and then the little ferret bit my finger. And then when he took him from me, it bit him, and that was the end. He said, he walked outside. I didn't even know what he was going to do, and he shoved him up the tailpipe of our car while the car was running, and while the little pet was alive. And that was the first pet that he ever killed. And then from there on, he would get pets for the kids. Oh, you want a potbelly pig? Get the pig, and then killed the pig, because they were 4 and I think 5 at the time, and they didn't put the water in the dish, and so he shot the pig right in front of them, and all the little piglets, just as punishment. And then a horse, many dogs, many cats, just because. And one time he even took me door to door because I was looking for my little dog, and he drove me around door to door while I went and knocked on houses and said, have you seen this little brown dog? And he knew that he had already, he had killed it a couple of weeks before. So that was another way to maintain the control, was if you loved it, I have control over it, and I can make it go away.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Did you have a plan put in place that you were ever going to escape?
There was never a plan. I wrote notes sometimes and hid them in places that I thought he wouldn't find, but even that scared me, because then I thought he would find it. But there was never a plan. I just thought that one day my kids are going to come home and I'm going to be dead. They're going to find me dead. And they will most likely find him dead too, because he always said, if I kill you, I'm going to kill myself, because I'm never going to prison. And so I just thought that this is the way I was going to, I just accepted this was my life, and it would probably never be different.
Now, you started out, what state did you, Florida, wasn't it?
Florida, born and
Florida,
raised in
and then
Florida.
he brought you to Tennessee.
Yeah, which was very foreign to me because I had never lived outside of Florida, and you know, he wanted to move us to a rural area because I think he was feeling the grip. His mom and dad always lived nearby, and I think he just really wanted to. Well, he told me that he wanted to get away from everyone, and I didn't want to go. But I really had no choice, so I kind of had to get on board with the plan.
Now, in the book, you talk about, at one point, you did talk to his parents, didn't you, about the abuse? And
well, we would go when we had a fight. It was a very big fight, and my Nana found out about it, and my step-grandpa, and they went to the pastor and his wife, and then we were called down there to go and, you know, and I can remember my Nana and my stepdad, my step-grandpa were sitting in the car. And I remember I wanted to go get in the car with them and just leave. But then something inside of me was like, well, don't you want to save your marriage? Don't you want to break the cycle of divorce? You know, this isn't how you do it. You have to fight for your marriage. And so went into his mom and dad's house, and, you know, they talked with us. His dad talked with us, prayed with us. And I just thought, okay, this is what I need to do. God hates divorce. That's what I kept hearing.
there was a moment, though, when you were here in Tennessee that was a horrible day. The someday, you're like, someday, you know, we're going to be out of this. This was the day. But then a tragedy happened in the midst of it. And we're going to talk about that when we come back. Sandee Jo, you talk about a day off. You were so excited about it, and it was going to be a great day. It was the Easter weekend, wasn't it?
It was actually Good Friday.
Good Friday.
And I love Easter, everything about Easter. And I was sitting on the couch with our youngest daughter, who was 9, and I was reading her one of the stories out of a Bible book. And I heard this horrible noise, which was glass shattering. It was a noise that I was acquainted with, but I never got used to. And I knew that something was going on, some kind of ruckus downstairs. And immediately I saw our son run up the stairs from the basement and run out the front door. And right behind him was my husband. And I immediately jumped up from the couch and ran and tried to, I didn't know what was going on, but I never did. I mean, anything could set him off. So knowing what
And he
made him
drank a
mad.
lot too, didn't
Yeah,
he?
he started drinking that morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so there was already like the smell of liquor on his breath. But I just tried to keep him from getting our son, because he was the target that day. Some days I was the target, some days he was the target, but he was definitely the target that day. And he was saying terrible things to him, horrible things. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to split your head open. And he picked up this pickaxe and began just swinging it in every direction. And Bubba would run off, and he's hollering, "Why are you doing this, Dad? Why are you doing this?" And I just kept telling Bubba, "Run, run, run." That went on for a couple hours. It was just like a standoff and a struggle. And he ran finally. But at the end of the day, when he came back, he actually shot and killed his dad to protect himself and to protect me and the kids. And our lives changed, like in a second.
What was going through your head at the time you saw him walk out with that gun?
With the gun, yeah. I thought that he was walking out. I had taken the kids out, and I said, "Run to the woods, just get away." Because in my heart, I knew today was the day. Like, I was gonna die because I was gonna do anything I could to protect our son. And I told the kids to run and don't come back for a long time. So I was actually outside. He came walking out of the door, and he had the gun beside him. And I thought to myself, yes, keep the gun beside you, because we need it. You know, we have to protect ourselves. And he walked over to me and he said, "Mom, I shot Dad." And I heard him say that, but I just couldn't register it. And I said, "No, keep the gun beside you. Keep it close." And he said, "Mom," he said, "Dad's dead." He said, "He's not going to hurt us anymore." And with
How
that,
old was your son then?
17. And he'd only been 17 for like 3 months. Then I told the kids, I said, because they didn't hear, they were standing off, and I said, "Go to the front porch and sit. Go around to the front porch and sit." And so we walked back into the house, and it was very obvious that at that point that, his dad was dead. And again, that our lives changed that day. I was no longer afraid in an instant. Once I confirmed and once I knew that he was dead, I was no longer afraid of telling anybody. You know, that fear that I just lived with for so many years was gone. But then I had a new fear. Well, I actually didn't have that fear at the time, because in that moment I thought, well, we're going to call the police. We're going to tell them what happened. And I honestly thought we would come home that night.
But it didn't happen.
No, because I had no clue that, that there would be like an investigation and I could possibly be the one that they think did it. And there was just so much that
Let's talk about that.
Understand.
So what happened after he was shot, called the police, then what
Actually, I
happened?
called my neighbor, and then my neighbor called the police. And we went to the police station. And I remember walking in.
Did they come to the house, though, beforehand, the police?
They did, but we weren't there. We were
Okay.
at my neighbor's house. I had called my neighbor to come pick us up, and she did. And then she called the police, so they actually picked us up from the neighbor's house. And then we walked into the police station, and I can remember them doing our hands, and then for residue, for gun residue.
Your son.
Yeah, me and my son. And then they took us to separate rooms. And that's when I realized, not at first, but then I realized they were asking me questions, and the questions got a little more intense and persistent. And even though I was telling my story, they kept re-asking the same questions. And then I started to realize, oh my goodness, like this is not going to go well. And they actually took Bubba, and I didn't see him for a little while. I mean, they took him for 5 to 6 weeks and could talk to him on the phone. And then finally I did I could visit him, but it was only for like 20 minutes at a time.
So you're at the police station. Did you think about calling an attorney or lawyer?
It never crossed my mind. And then my friend said, because I remember looking down and I saw blood, and they were asking me about the blood, the marks on my neck, and I looked down, I didn't even know I had blood on me. And I said, oh, this isn't my blood. This is, I'm okay. I thought they were concerned about me. And I said, no, I'm okay. I said, this is my husband's blood. And then when I said that, my friend kind of leaned over and said, why don't you get a lawyer? And then it was really when I realized, okay, this is how it is. This is how it looks. For the first time, I realized that this was not going to be easy. And he was charged with first-degree murder. And when I did hire the lawyer, he said, this could go either way. And so I never had anything like positive to just, okay, this is going to be okay. And for like 5 weeks, I didn't know the outcome. I didn't know.
So was he in juvenile detention?
Yeah, they took him there, and then they actually had to do a mental evaluation on him. So, but at the end of it, the investigation proved that it was self-defense. He got 5 years probation, and he served it with excellency, and then they expunged it from his record, and he went on to serve time in the military. So God is so good.
Is he doing well today?
Yes.
And he's
happily married.
Yeah, he's still in Tennessee.
He's still in Tennessee, happily married, and we have 2 grandbabies. So.
Grandbabies, that's wonderful. So we only have a few more minutes left. What would you say to somebody that is going through this?
I would tell them that they are not alone. And that's one thing that I feel like I have to stress, because when I went through it, I felt like I was alone. You're not alone. You have to tell someone. Because telling someone actually helps with that control. I think to keep it that dark secret just perpetuates the control. So you have to tell somebody. And then you have to get out. You have to separate yourself from the abuser. And what I know today that I didn't know then was there are shelters. There are places that can help you do this. They can help you work out a safety plan. And they work with law enforcement if needed. They help you get a restraining order. There are so many things that these shelters do. And then they protect you for 8 weeks at the minimum, and sometimes longer, just to keep you and your kids safe.
What about your faith? Where was your faith in all of this as you look back and going through all the abuse? Where was your faith?
I couldn't have made it through without my faith, because I depended on God every single day. A lot of those prayers that I prayed were just the rescue us prayers. God keep us safe. God get us out of these circumstances. It was a lot of that, God, please help, please help. And many times I would say, God, why aren't you helping? And especially on that fateful day when everything happened, I remember just looking up to the sky and saying, God, why aren't you helping us? But it caused me to just hold on to God and my faith. And in the years to follow, of course, when Tommy was gone, and the years, my healing years, I like to call them, God has been just so faithful to me and brought me through the emotional problems that I had to work through, the nightmares, and then finally just saying, hey, I want you to tell your story. I want you to write a book, and this isn't about you anymore. This is about helping others.
If walls could talk. Sandee Jo, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm sure somebody is listening today that needed to hear it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My friend, are you going through an abusive situation? Remember, God is with you. He is faithful. He promises He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. This is today's Nashville. This is faith.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.
Hey everyone, I am here with Jason Lovins. You're not going to want to miss his episode and hear his story. Powerful, amazing. God is sovereign. He is constant. You'll want to check out his video, Constant, on YouTube.
Yeah.
Jason, say something.
Hey guys, honored to be here. We've had a great day. You're not going to want to miss this one.